Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Josh, what's your last name? Olson. Olson. I was gonna call you Josh Collins. Oh, sorry. Well, you know, it's all in the family then, yeah.
Two Josh.
So cute. Right. Thank you. So are we ready?
Ready if you are.
All right. Are we recording?
Yes, we just
Okay,
started.
thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. We are going to get this workshop started. It's a delight that we have the river balcony being presented here for us today. I want to say thank you to our Economic Development Director, Carrie Collins, and to Josh Olson, who is our project manager. Our River's Edge project and the River Balcony project, working together along with other things along the river, make it an exciting time for us here in Ramsey County. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Josh to get us started with, I'm sorry?
Do you want to do intro?
Well, why don't we do intros first? Let's do intros. I'm Tony Carter, District 4, Ramsey County Commissioner. Mary Jo McGuire, Commissioner, District 2.
Nicole Fred, I'm Ramsey County Commissioner, District 1.
Rafael Ortega, District 5.
Victoria Reinhardt, District 7.
Jim McDonough, District 6.
Samantha Castillo, District 3.
Josh Olson, Community and Economic Development.
Brett Husong, I'm a landscape architect in Parks and Recreation.
Ryan, I'm sorry.
Doesn't want to be me. Ryan O'Connor, County Manager.
Barry Collins, Community.
Rick Houghton, Community and Economic Development.
Doing Commissioner McGuire. Jennifer O'Rourke, Government Relations. Joanna Berg, Deputy County Manager. Me, Chang, Chief Clerk.
Gary Tobel, Commissioner Reinhardt's office.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will turn it over to Josh for introductions.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. This is actually a really nice opportunity for community economic development because we can step back from the table and let our partners here at the City of St. Paul and the Great River Passage Conservancy to kind of give you an update and a walkthrough of the work related to the river balcony. I think it's an exciting moment. We've been working with the river balcony crew for a while now, and this is a different partnership that we've had from other things that we've done. But I think there's a joint excitement that all of us share on these projects, and I say these projects with River's Edge and others, really bringing excitement and passion to back to the river. So I am going to pass this over to Mary Delight from the Great River Conservancy, and she can kick us off.
Well, thank you, Josh, and Madam Chair and Commissioners. It's actually really a pleasure to be here. I'm assuming you can all hear me okay, right?
We can hear you.
Okay, terrific. Listen, on behalf of my colleagues at the city, which includes Director Goodman, who is here today, as well as Project Manager Brett Husong, and the River Balcony Design Team, as I said before, it's really a pleasure to be here and to be able to talk about the river balcony, to brief you on the full project over the next hour and a half. One of the things that I just wanted to remind you all about is that thanks to your leadership, you were actually the first ones in. Ramsey County commit $100,000 to this project, to the schematic design, ages ago. And frankly, it's thanks to that $100,000 starting us off and that leap of faith that you took that we are here today. So without further ado, I'm actually going to hand you off to Brett to give you some of the particulars of the project.
All right, thanks, Mary. Once again, my name is Brett Husong. I'm a lead landscape architect and the River Balcony project manager for Parks and Recreation. So I want to thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners, for this opportunity to discuss the River Balcony project. Many of you are aware of the project. You've been on the site walks, you've been on some of the presentations. So you are aware of the extent of the project, but I want to remind you that this is a large-scale project that does include a lot of the Ramsey County sites, including River's Edge, the county parking lots just below Second Street, Union Depot, to name a few. So with that, we have a lot of same and similar interest goals when talking about the river balcony, which include equity, access, connectivity, and activation of downtown, both horizontally along the bluff and then vertically from downtown to the river. And so also in a recent briefing to the mayor's office, Mayor Carter did reiterate his support for those same goals that I just listed. So as two of the largest landowners along the river bluff, the city and county have an opportunity to enhance this river corridor. We've put together a great project team that you will meet here shortly, and we've been actively working with county staff, as Josh mentioned. And we're trying to identify a lot of those opportunities and constraints where we can work together and really create a sense of space and enhance the river balcony. So we'll keep on working closely across jurisdictions to make these collective goals a reality and design the riverfront and the corridor. So I'd like to introduce Lisa and Sanjukta with James Corner Field Operations to present the proposed schematic design plans. And so thank you and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you. Welcome.
Great, thank you guys. Can you all hear me okay, hopefully? It's a great pleasure to be here, even though it's virtual. We will actually be coming towards the end of this month. We're really excited to have a public open house June 25th. I know that because it's actually my birthday. So I'm Lisa Switkin. I'm a senior principal at James Corner Field Operations, and I'm joined here by my colleague Sanjukta Sen, as well as Mara and Ethan from HRNA. So we do have a presentation. We wanted to try to go into depth with you just in terms of where we're at, but I will say, I mean, we're happy to sort of have it be more conversational, however you're used to these workshops running. You know, we can sort of pause at particular moments and have the conversation, or we can go through the whole thing and then come back to it later, whatever is kind of best for you. So, you know, we're today, there's a couple things. We'll sort of do this design presentation where we'll give you a larger project overview. We'll talk a little bit about the outreach and engagement that's been done to date, as well as, you know, a body of work that's been done even before we entered, you know, the project with the Great River Passage Conservancy. And then we'll just share where we are. We're currently in 75% schematic design, and we just wanted to brief you on that. And then we'll be passing it on to Mara and Ethan to sort of talk more about the transformative potential of the balcony, to talk more deeply about the operations, programming, and governance, as well as a series of asks. I am going to turn that off so that does not keep happening. Sorry. Okay. So one thing just to note, and we wanted you to sort of be aware of the larger schematic design scope. There is what we call the design, which involves, you know, analysis, exploring some of the design concepts, some of the basic features and programming, and kind of getting the general look and feel of the project, the character of the project in schematic design. But we've also, side by side with that, been looking at preliminary estimates for both capital costs and long-term maintenance, looking at a preliminary phasing and implementation strategy, looking at high-level funding strategies, preliminary partnerships and governance approach, as well as a preliminary public art approach and strategy. We're focusing on the design as well as the kind of long-term maintenance, operation costs, and funding and governance in this particular meeting. But all of these are sort of being worked on together because the real goal was, you know, to do a schematic design, but to do it with an eye towards both implementation and long-term stewardship. You kind of need to, of course, at a scale of this project. And it's been about an 11-month iterative design process, and we're in May. We have a couple months to go. We're right at that 75. Sorry, we're now in June actually, at that 75%.
Oh my.
I know, I can't believe it. At that 75% touch stone. And, you know, the whole point was to have multiple kind of touch points along the way. And to really, you know, this is an opportunity that we really look forward to comments and feedback that will inform the work. Schematic design, while we're nearing the end of that process, it's still very early in the sort of larger overarching design process, because this is just schematic. It's not the detailed design or construction, design, et cetera. So obviously, I hope it's obvious, one of the things that is the most powerful about the River Balcony project is really its potential as a key connector to connect public spaces, civic landmarks, development sites, and strengthen connections to the river, which are, as Brett mentioned, it's not just the kind of horizontal, but quite a feat to kind of do the vertical transformations here from the bluff to the river. It's 1.5 miles long, and it's the promenade along the bluff, but also with these river connections looking at the riverfront. And we have, Kellogg Road on the top, and you have Shepherd Road on the bottom. And, it's anchored, of course. One of the things that's really great about the site, you can go to the framework, Sindrikta, is that it's anchored, by the Science Museum and the River Center to the west, but also Union Depot and Lampert's Landing to the east. So it has these really strong kind of anchors on both sides, which we think is a great asset. And of course, all of the different ties between downtown and the riverfront. And the framework plan really identified all of the sites and stakeholders who would be participating, in determining the actual physical footprint, the alignment, the character, the programming, and the operations of the river balcony. As you can see, it's not like an easy map. There are so many different players and parts. And of course, Ramsey County is a huge stakeholder in all of this. And our initial effort was actually literally finding the site. We weren't given a boundary or a site. We actually had to kind of carefully piece together all of these different parcels and easements and rights of ways and sort of think about this. And we're still, to be determined what the actual physical footprint is. But what this map shows is the kind of catchment area, the potential of like the full sort of build out of the river balcony, and how it can sort of literally touch all these sites. And all of these are all the players, of which you are one of them. And at the same time, reach a much broader audience of all of St. Paul. And keep going. So early on, we kind of developed a series of overarching principles. One of the things that we tried very much to do is to actually build on what was already there. It might seem like a simple concept, but in fact, there were so many sort of pieces of infrastructure and different parkland and all of these things that were kind of existing that just needed to be sort of the needle threaded and thought of a little bit differently. Obviously, establishing really critical connections to the river, this idea of kind of prolonging people's stay and kind of activation along both the riverfront and downtown, creating really discrete but distinctive elements that you would kind of know that you were at the river balcony. Of course, fostering these different programmatic synergies, but also, with all of these different anchor institutions, new development sites, there's just such a power there in kind of creating these partnerships. Cultivating connection to place and the sense of belonging. I mean, one of the things that I have found to be incredibly inspirational is actually listening to Mayor Carter speak about this notion of river, what he calls river lore, and the sort of power of the river and the stories of the river and the sort of life of water and what it means to St. Paul, and kind of developing this larger narrative and sense of belonging and kind of place along the river. And then also, of course, meeting the needs of the local communities and residents, but also attracting the much larger St. Paul community. So a number of different inspirations have kind of informed the work. This idea of course, the river, this notion of river lore and sort of stories of the river. The ecoregions, St. Paul is a place where the sort of prairie meets the big woods. The bluff condition itself, this notion of larger activation, both I think with the literal river itself, as well as with downtown and the bluff, and then really leveraging all of the incredible neighborhoods and communities that really can be touched by the project. So we've been very fortunate to work with a really great engagement team, which includes 106 Group, who is leading the engagement local to St. Paul, Claim Our Space, another incredible local group. Forecast Public Art, as well as Sam Obelkson of Four Circle Indigenous Planning. And he is actually looking even more broadly sort of at the larger Great River Passage Conservancy's kind of footprint along the entire river. Our engagement plan is really trying to do a number of things. So there's a series of technical advisory and stakeholder committees that we do. We had a series of focus groups that we're continuing to sort of engage with historically underrepresented populations, including Hmong, Somali, African American, and Latinx communities. There's been public community workshops. We had one in February. Our next one is upcoming at the end of the month. A series of surveys. We've had 2 already, which I'll give you a quick recap on, and there will be a 3rd one also at the end of June. We've had a number of kind of large scale boards and lobbies and institutions and project partners, again, just to try to get more traffic and people to kind of be more aware of the project, and that invites them to look at the QR code and the website to get further information. And we've also been doing translation in multiple languages, in Spanish, Hmong, Karen, and Somali, in order to just get that, you know, wider and broader, diverse audience. So some of the key takeaways in terms of what we've heard has been, you know, a general kind of support and excitement for the project, as well as the initial design concepts that we shared back in February. One of the things that we have heard, of course, is this notion of like figuring out ways to address Shepherd Road as a current barrier, Shepherd Road and the railroad as a current barrier to the river, increasing more opportunities for activation and programming, reinforcing the city's equity goals with the project, showing how the river balcony really can tie into and strengthen all of the other sort of networks and systems that the city is actively kind of working on, including open space, trails, bike networks, et cetera. That this, you know, in some ways is kind of a missing piece or missing tooth in some of those. Providing opportunities for access to nature and integrating natural materials and elements. I think there's a strong opinion that the site, obviously with its industrial legacy, has a lot of grit already there. And so finding ways to introduce nature is most welcome. And then ensuring authentic engagement with all of these historically underrepresented populations, which, you know, there's been a huge effort with the Dakota, especially also with Hmong, Somali, African American, and Latin Hispanic communities. So these were some of the results from survey 1, and this was one of the ones that some of you may have even participated in. It was really, we did a series of walking tours on site, and, you know, there was really the top priorities were about connecting with the river, creating public space at the river's edge, and really access to quality outdoor space. And then sort of just following that was really people's desire to really link the development to the river and encourage kind of and support river-based tourism. The top uses were really about walking, you know, being able to grab a bite to eat, relaxing and enjoying the views, and then of course strengthening access to the river, and closely related to that was also being able to attend different types of events, and specifically culturally specific events. The second survey, which was done in February, you know, 80% of it was taken by about 250 participants, and 80% of the respondents really noted that looking at the design, they did feel a stronger connection to the Mississippi River than they do today. But a lot of feedback related to this really urged the design team, urged us to really provide more physical connections to the river wherever possible, and consider ways to address Shepherd Road and the railroad in terms of creating better crossings. The sort of design features that people liked the most were the Big Woods Walk and the landing and the Bluff Walk, and we'll kind of show you where those are today. In terms of how people would most use the river balcony, about 84% really said walking, viewing, sitting, and relaxing, with over 50% kind of saying that food and beverage opportunities, events, and public art would encourage them to stay longer and extend their visit in downtown. In terms of what people would most sort of want to see was definitely more access points and safe connections across Shepherd Road. You're seeing a theme here that keeps coming up. And followed by more green space with trees and flowers and use of native plants, the use of natural materials, focus on sustainability and sort of safety overall. And one of the things that we've been collecting that we're excited about, we sort of ask people to share any personal stories or experiences or traditions in response to this question of how does this place or what does this place have, special meaning to you? And some of the common themes to this were really included like childhood memories of growing up on the river, walking along the bluff or the riverfront, and these kind of larger universal concepts of water and how it sustains life. And so this goes back to that idea of storytelling in ways that we think this project can really bring people closer relationship to the Mississippi. So this is kind of an updated project map. And I think, one of it has the key pieces in the yellow. Oh, sorry, you can go.
Sorry, one second.
It's being a little
Jumpy.
There was one, was there the project? Oh, I'll do this first. So one of the things just to say is since we last presented this in February, there's been a number of updates and many of the updates have actually been coordinating with Ramsey County, for example, and other stakeholders. So we've been coordinating with the Kellogg Bridge project over to the west. We've been looking at the ongoing design coordination with the Science Museum and District Energy. We've had further discussions with Josh and the team at River's Edge. We've been looking at, new park amenities and access points and features within Kellogg Mall Park because it is such an incredible resource that's already there, but is really underutilized. And then of course at Lampert's Landing, we've also been having discussions with cruise operations, with Viking Cruises, as well as, some of the other players along the actual riverfront and the waterway. And this project map kind of summarizes, there's the sort of the yellow, which is kind of the bluff walk, there's the blue, which is the river walk, and then there's these series of, connections between them, some of which are at grade, some of, we're actually purposely showing the River's Edge connection here over Shepherd Road and the railroad because it is such an important connection that while, we've sort of talked about that this is this great moment where these two projects are coming together. So while that's a different project, it's very much part of this project in terms of how it ends up being that access point. And then there's kind of the bigger territories, if you will, or the kind of what's in green here in terms of what we're calling the Big Woods Walk on the western side, and then sort of reimagining and rethinking portions of Kellogg Mall Park, and then Lampert's Landing at the water's edge when you get down to Union Depot. And this is an overall site plan. I'm actually going to turn it over to Sanjukta to sort of talk to you about, I think just for ease, we've kind of looked at it in these four general sections. These are also, the start of ideas in terms of phasing and implementation, although not necessarily in order, but she'll kind of walk you through each of the sections from the River Center and Science Museum to the sort of River's Edge District Energy to Kellogg Mall Park, what we're calling the new 2nd Street connector and the county parking lot, and then finally Lampert's Landing and the railroad underpasses. I will turn it over to Sanjukta.
Great. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Oops. Hang on one second. All right. Can everybody still see my screen?
We can.
Great. Okay, so we'll do a quick walk through the 1.5 miles. And hopefully we'll all get to do it in person in a couple of weeks. But as far as the design stands now, we'll start at the River Center and the Science Museum. And some of the design references for this area that we had, shared previously really engage the existing topography, the sort of fairly dramatic topographical change that you observe from the bluff level to the river level. And this is indeed one of those places where there's some expanse to get the big views and potentially also engage with some of the habitat potential that the area has. And so this is where the site plan stands now. we sort of were looking at enhancing the Big Woods Walk along Eagle Parkway, but maintaining the shared use bikeway and walkway alongside. We also spent some time coordinating with the Kellogg Bridge project that kind of brings you on to Kellogg Boulevard. And then really looking at potential zone really, because this further out in the future for the River Center ramp development and what kind of relationship it might potentially have with the Big Woods Walk and the park over there. As you sort of descend down towards the river, the Science Museum grounds really become a sort of part of the overall river balcony experience. And this is really one of those major intersection points where the bluff kind of comes down and meets the river. And the Science Museum Amphitheater is one of those sort of spaces that we really see as at the cusp of these kind of two institutional gestures, really, the river balcony and the Science Museum kind of meeting together at the waterfront. Sort of an overall view of what that might look like with sort of the Big Woods Walk descending down and bringing it down to the river, but also this kind of path through the building that brings you down at the Science Museum. We are sort of looking at animating the Big Woods Walk with potentially an observation tower and a few other elements that might attract art and programming that are related to the River Center and to Kellogg Boulevard in general. This is a view from the observation tower. We think it's a really exciting prospect for this to almost act as a gateway structure for the river balcony. It really is a marker on this end of the site, and it really gives you these magnificent treetop views out to the river. A look at Big Woods Walk as it kind of snakes down along Eagle Parkway, and really a potential to create something really natural and green that attracts birds and, a potential bird feeder zone, if you will, but also a potential to create a relationship with the adjacent development by creating access points from there. A look at the Science Museum Amphitheater as you come further down towards the river, which really affords you this kind of circular panorama. It's kind of an interior space, but also really looks out to the river and across the city. Just keep moving further towards the Science Museum. This is still somewhat in coordination phase with the Science Museum and with District Energy, where we are trying to see if we can potentially create some access points across Shepherd to a more direct and legible connection to the Science Museum stairs, up to the Kellogg Plaza that the Science Museum will be building, and potentially a great spot for a new overlook that can happen over there. A potential rendering of the overlook that could sort of characterize that end of the Kellogg Plaza. It's a really amazing view out across the river, which is one of the most open vistas that we have. So we're pretty excited by the prospect of potentially doing this and furnishing them with some fun elements like swings and these wraparound benches. Moving on towards River's Edge and the energy site. Oops, excuse me. Some of the program references we had shared previously, and these are things that we'll work with the county to potentially look at maybe using some of the elevational and topographical differences between the upper level and the lower level to introduce some interesting play programs, but also use the site to potentially have more F&B and planting related programs like a tree nursery, and then also potentially a beer garden. The site plan really looks at
Everyone loved the beer garden.
But maybe we don't plan it.
Yeah, don't be doing that.
Do it again?
Sorry
I didn't catch the first. I didn't
We have
catch the second
two
half.
potential locations for beer gardens, so.
That's how all design starts. Where can the beer gardens be?
I might just share, Sanjukta, that your voice is a little low. If you could speak a little louder, it would help.
Sure, I'll speak closer to the mic and I will be louder.
Thank you.
Can you guys hear me better now?
Yes. Yeah, well.
Okay, great. So this is the River's Edge. This is the River's Edge site. You guys probably recognize some of the development plans that have been previously shared by the county and by the ACOM team. We are looking at closely coordinating what the future phase of the river balcony as it snakes through this development will be. I think one of the interesting aspects of this development is the pedestrian connection that it affords across from the bluff, across Shepherd, down to the river, across the railway tracks. It's one of the more challenging areas, so that's something that we'll continue to coordinate with the team. Sorry, is there a question there? Did I hear
No.
something?
Go ahead.
Okay.
No.
Great.
And Josh, just to be clear, I mean, that was meant to literally just be the sketch of the final build out for the River's Edge in terms of whatever the latest we had, but we're just showing how that fits into the larger river balcony plan.
That's right. Yeah. Then just for the almost the general condition of the Kellogg Boulevard as you go along River's Edge and then towards the more central parts of River Balcony, looking at the street condition as something that will be almost a typical condition for the River Balcony, and really looking at pedestrian-friendly and bicycle-friendly designs that can make the experience along Kellogg a really sort of active, warm, and safe experience as you go along. This is a typical section along Kellogg Boulevard. Here we're looking at how it relates to River's Edge and along the bluff, but really we were looking at sort of how the sidewalk can really be engaged to kind of snake along the development as it is conceptualized in the further phases. This is a quick look at the overlook we are potentially proposing in the sort of void between District Energy and River's Edge. It's one of the key kind of endpoints of Market Street, and we think it could be a really interesting moment to kind of a really interesting knuckle to kind of use as an overlook moment that can be almost like a respite as you're walking down Kellogg. Any questions before I move on to Kellogg Mall Park?
Thank you. You know, we're intrigued as this is a first opportunity to look at the whole path, and I don't see questions right now. Oh,
I have
County
one,
Manager.
actually, thanks. On the last slide you just showed before, slide 30, I think, one more back, on the cross street of Kellogg Boulevard, I thought Kellogg Boulevard in this section also was a part of the Capital City Bikeway. And I don't is the 22-foot PED, is that inclusion of the Capital City Bikeway on this cross section?
So the River Balcony project right now only lives on this side of the section. Everything else on the left is a part of the Kellogg.
I just missed the red. I'm sorry. It's there, and I'm the last one in the room to see it. So thank you. The answer is right in front of me.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the bike path is to the north. Yeah.
That's right.
You got it. It won't fit that sentence.
You want my seat?
Thank you, Sanjukta.
Thanks
for clarifying, Orion. That was good too.
No worries. Okay, so we will move on to the central portion of our project, which is Kellogg Mall Park, 2nd Street Connector, and the county parking lot, which is really a fascinating topographical sandwich, if you will. It's probably the most interesting layer cake we have dealt with, I think, as an office in some ways. But some of the design references that we were really excited by here, just because of the topographical nature of the park and sort of how it's perched on its existing topography on top of infrastructure and on top of the existing bluff. Some of the references that really excited us were revealing some of those aspects of the bluff itself. but really also inviting nature, the kind of original nature of the bluff back into this area, and then really looking at opportunities for enhancing the viewing and the observing aspect of it, and also the active social aspects of being at the park, and at this location of downtown in particular. So this is a really packed part of River Balcony in some ways because you already have a really great existing park here. It's got some of the most beautiful trees, which we really would love to preserve, but also activate the underside of, in some ways, the floor of the park, and really invite people from downtown in here. So some of the programs that we're introducing or suggesting on the top side of the park are really looking at F&B opportunities, like, again, a beer garden. As Lisa promised, there are more beer gardens. And then yay. Okay. Then a couple of more play opportunities that might activate another demographic. And then also potentially using some of the existing water feature elements that you have to create more interactive elements potentially that would have a seasonal aspect to them. As I mentioned, the trees are really great. So I think using their quality and character to really create these newer programs that activate it more is something that we are looking very closely at. And then sort of looking at potentially weaving your way down. I'll show a couple of three-dimensional elements soon to Second Street Connector, which also meets topographically the access from Minnesota Street through what we're calling the Kellogg Cut, which is really a series of steps, and that takes you directly down to the Second Street Connector. A lot of you know Second Street Connector today as a kind of deserted corridor, right, where maybe once a week one car comes along. And what we are really looking at is potentially pedestrianizing it and really activating it, and using it as this covered extension of Kellogg Mall Park in some ways that really combines the presence of the park, the connector, and the parking lot down below as sort of one cohesive experience. You can kind of see the three-dimensional view of that. This really shows all of it together, where sort of the bluff shelf that is up here really meets Kellogg Mall Park topographically at this location, and then slowly descends via the Second Street Connector down towards the county parking lot. And then sort of the suggested programs that we are looking at underneath that mature canopy of trees that would reactivate the park. At the county parking lot, we are really looking to propose some playful markings and courts, if possible, that look at sports that are that are basketball and some other sports, but also culturally specific ones that you see court markings for up here. They're also suggesting this could potentially have interim and seasonal programs like food trucks or farmers markets that could potentially happen here.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is meant to be an overlay over parking. So we assume the parking will continue here, but that on after hours or weekends or things, these opportunities could happen.
Right. So
these are not seen as taken over the parking function. It's more as it's an and function as opposed to an or function, if you will. This is a
sorry, I'm going to ask I'm going to ask a really dumb question. Are the drawings, the illustrations in the parking lot?
Yeah.
Yes, under the cars?
Yeah.
That's where we park? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Park on top of the.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the idea is that you could potentially have local artists, do murals on the courts, which would also have the markings for parking.
Sounds fun. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you. I'm intrigued by all these drawings. I'm just curious if you could identify for me, I'm going to follow my county manager's questions, of the bike path. Where I know you said there's a bike path up on Kellogg, which is the capital city bike path. But we also know that I think there's a bike path down along the river. Anyway, we want there to be some bike path connecting, not just stairs. So could you just, help me see where that, I think there was gonna be we were thinking of a serpentine way that bikes could go up or down to, rather than just stairs for people. Am I in a different
So-
place on in our plan, or where would that be?
Right, so yes, you're right, there's a bikeway up on Kellogg, there's a bikeway down on Shepherd. The way we were contemplating it is if we pedestrianize largely East Second Street, that could be the place where bikers are also able to go down because it's a fairly wide promenade. There might be some rules that you'd have to adopt about shared use, right? Because it's a mix of speeds, etc. But that is an actually existing, very natural sloped pathway that bikers could take
To the
down
river
to
and
the river
cross
cross at Jackson or Sibley to come across to the river. So it's almost using the existing infrastructure that you already have to bring folks down from that topographic difference. Does that answer the question?
Just for the group who remember Riverview, our Riverview project, do we also have a serpentine way down to the river in our Riverview project? Do we have a? I thought there was
In our river,
I thought there was some way to go on bikes from, like,
in River's
where
Edge.
we are in River's Edge, excuse me, River's Edge. Sorry, I said Riverview, River's Edge project.
So the River's Edge project also, excuse me, I'll go back to it for a second, also has a plan for taking you down from the upper deck down towards the park over here.
Mhm.
Okay, so sorry, I was in a different section. Okay, so that's.
Right,
No worries.
but at Kellogg
Sure.
Mall, we're saying East Second Street would function
One
as
sec.
that.
1 second, please. Josh?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner, McGuire, that, there's a notation there that's kind of in yellow, kind of below the inset, it's 94.5, you'll see a note there.
Mhm.
That is in some ways a high point, as the bluff falls towards the river to the east, and then it rises a little bit, further there to the west. But the point is River's Edge becomes one opportunity for folks within the central, business district to get down to the river.
Okay.
And what, Sanjuta and Lisa were kind of referencing is a second way going towards the east,
Okay.
using that Second Street, which is an existing pathway in this case.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you.
whereas ours on the River's Edge project would be brand new.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Back
Mhm.
to you all.
Sure. So this is a look at the water feature along Cedar that we're sort of contemplating, which utilizes the infrastructure that's already present in the park, but potentially turns it into something interactive and perhaps a little more playful. This is what we were calling the Kellogg Cut at Minnesota Street. So as you come from Minnesota Street and enter Kellogg Mall Park, it really kind of now kind of focuses your view across the river and out across towards this really amazing horizon.
It's also
And
an
it's also an
opportunity.
opportunity. Am I hearing an echo? Okay.
Yes,
It's also it's also an opportunity to really kind of use this as a gathering spot and potential small performances or areas where events can be held, which have a really good connectivity and access because of the pedestrianized East Second Street.
Yeah, and then one thing to add with that is it also brings kind of light and air down into the Second Street connector at that moment. So it's creating another connection.
And this is back up on the park level where we were looking at potential opportunities for park concessions and potential beer garden seating, which are kind of coupled with play areas. So parents can bring their kids, have a beer, kids can play there. It could be a sort of kind of cross demographic use for the park in this part of downtown. If we go down towards the Second Street connector, it is we are looking at creating a sort of stepped transition from the upper level of the park, and then really using the bluff shelf as a place to kind of come out closer to that ledge and introduce some of that bluff ecology back into this part of the site. This, as you all know, is one of the last remaining fragments of the bluff in this part of St. Paul. So we are really looking at all ways possible to celebrate it and materialize it as much as possible. This is a quick three-dimensional look. If you kind of rip off the top, the lid of Kellogg Mall Park, and just look at East 2nd Street as it sort of descends down from Minnesota and then up here from Wabasha. This really takes you down all the way to the Jackson and Sibley crossing, which are the railroad underpasses, and then the sort of bluff shelf garden with its little overlooks, and sort of this idea of being out on the green is something that we're really looking at installing here. A quick view of what that descent from the Wabasha corner as you go down East 2nd Street could look like with Kellogg Mall Park up here, and this is something you all recognize. This is the sort of platform of promenade platform of Kellogg Mall Park hanging out, and then really looking at extending that bluff shelf experience along that way. This is further down East 2nd Street with opportunities for activation, park concessions, for instance, places to get a coffee or a bite as you're sort of heading down this way. And again, just to point out, this is kind of a natural connection you all already have. So we really think it can be used as a bike and ped connection up the bluff down to the river without having to invest in something new necessarily as a sort of approach. You can kind of see the county parking lot down here as well, the sort of mural markings that we are looking at as something that can be parked on, but also played on depending on the time of the week or the month. Quick look at the Kellogg Cut as it descends down from Kellogg Mall Park. The river is in over here, and you can kind of see that kind of light and air being introduced, as Lisa was saying a couple of minutes ago, into that kind of dark place that we have under there right now. And these are some of the design references that we were using for not only the undercroft of the bridges, but also some of the more flexible uses or the more calendar-based uses that we are looking at for the county parking lot. Quick view of the bluff from the parking lot. This is, I think, a view-only experience right now by people who park there. So we are hoping that proposing something like this might bring more people who are able to really appreciate the bluff in its majesty, but also look at this art potentially in like really interesting new, some interesting new vantages, right? You don't often get to see something that's painted on a ceiling from so far below, or something that's painted on a floor from so far up. So it really gives you opportunities for very varied experiences and very unique experiences. Any questions before I move on to Lambert's Landing?
I just wanted to ask, because somehow I lost the road, and I don't know, did we replace in this the road, the 2nd Street Connector Road, with that pavilion-like area?
Yes. So the 2nd Street Connector is now being proposed to be pedestrian. So we're not per se replacing the road, we're just making it a pedestrian park experience.
Because it really does not need to be there for traffic purposes today.
That's our take.
Great, thank
Right,
you.
and it could still be
there
used
others
for
for
emergency vehicles and egress and all that. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, County Manager O'Connor has a question, and then Commissioner McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just in a thought exercise as you go through final visioning, and additional conversations needed, but as we talk about a future beyond Ramsey County Government Center East, and we're actively in the process of moving out, what we've currently wanted to maintain as a parking lot, we should at least question whether or not there's a higher or better use as a part of this overall river vision, unless everyone's dying to keep the east.
Nope, that's in the back of all our minds.
So I would just
for
say
sure.
we may be able to do more or do this more full-time than what was previously envisioned, and we can talk more. We still need to, but it would be worth the conversation.
In any case, it's a great use of a parking lot on the weekends right now, and we look forward to more. I know that you'll be connecting and continuing to plan together. Were there others? Just quick question. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad you asked that question, County Manager, because I was thinking the same thing, like maybe we don't need this parking lot. But, so you said the Second Street, road is gonna now be pedestrian only except for emergency vehicles. Is that the only road that we're making pedestrian only, or are we gonna do any
That's,
others? Wherever we can, I'm for it, but.
Yeah, as we stand.
Yeah,
as
can we
it
do
stands- from your mouth to God's ears. Yes, how do you feel about shepherds?
Yeah, how do I feel about
it's,
traffic?
no, we certainly would love to encourage more, I think, pedestrianized environments because it will encourage more footfall here. But as of now, in this segment, yes, we were looking only at East Second Street, mainly because it's so underutilized as a vehicular space. But I think any other opportunities we have for introducing traffic calming and more pedestrian and bicycle-friendly environments, we are certainly going to keep trying to incorporate them in our framework plan, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else in this segment before we?
No, keep going. Thank you.
All right. Okay, this is our last segment of, as far as design is concerned. This is the sort of Lambert's Landing Railroad underpasses in the Union Depot segment of the site. And this is really one of the opportunities where the river balcony kind of comes down and kind of physically touches the river. And again, the design references here were really to use the adjacency to the water and sort of the sort of maritime industrial character of it a little bit to see if we can introduce amount of recreation use, but also potentially structure.
I'm sorry, we have got, hello? We have what may be a delay. Could you try talking again? You were not comprehensible. Could you try again, Sanjusta?
Might be her earpods.
We're thinking it could be your earpods?
Oh, can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes? Much
Okay.
better.
Maybe my pods. They sometimes, Apple has not perfected this design yet. Okay, I'll try to rush through it. Okay, so yeah, we're trying to introduce some amount of structures and potential F&B spaces that could activate this and potentially have make it act more as a destination, not only from the local perspective, but also from the perspective of those who are visiting from outside of St. Paul, right, such as the cruise landing, and also other people coming and using the river from the riverside. We think that the nexus between Union Depot and the cruise dock is something that this area will get relatively high footfall, and there's a sort of value in putting some amount of retail and F&B opportunities here that could really activate the space. So as you can see, it's a pretty narrow spit of land, and we're sort of looking at what's the easiest way to cross through under these railroad underpasses and kind of bring people through from through the city to the water, and really looking at the railroad underpasses as a way to activate through lighting and through other and art as a way to safely cross and bring them through. A quick look at what that dock could look like. We are sort of looking at the docking opportunity for a cruise boat and other boat access in this area. We coordinate it to some extent with river operations and with Viking Cruises to really understand their needs and try to see where we can meet them in terms of amenity, where boating operations could also happen here, but also the space could be used as a recreational destination with a set of seating steps, access down to the dock, but also a sort of cafe and welcome center where people could get, a drink or hot chocolate, something that prolongs their stay in this area. A quick look at the three-dimensional aspect of it. The trail, of course, continues at the back, the riverfront trail, but this configuration really allows you to kind of stay and be here for a bit and be sort of closer to the river, and then sort of use the space as a destination rather than as a pass-through that it tends to be today. a quick view of what that can look like with some interesting furnishing up on the upper areas, and sort of a closer look at the more river level view down below. This is a quick look at what the Welcome Center and some of the seating spaces could be as you sort of look across towards the bridge and across the river. And I'm going to hand this back to Lisa to quickly summarize and then hand over to Mara.
Yeah, I want to make sure we give Mara and Ethan time. So this is just showing it sort of all coming together with the different features along the way. I think we can just quickly go through, and then, hopefully, one of the things that this is beginning to kind of do and show with this vision is this idea of the larger kind of transformative potential of the river balcony in terms of access and increasing and enhancing and strengthening the access to the river in terms of activation, both for downtown and the riverfront, as a connector and armature that is beginning to connect all of these other investments and projects and things happening. And then the larger kind of identity, river lore, and this idea of expanding kind of St. Paul's narrative around the river. And then the other side of it is, of course, the kind of economic side, the operations side, the governance side. So I'd like to turn it over to Mara and Ethan, unless you wanted to break here for questions first.
I can check. Yes, Commissioner Matis Castillo.
Yeah, thank you. It's all really beautiful and exciting, and we can definitely see the vision. Are the treatments that you're proposing, it looks like wood on most of those treatments, and we know Minnesota, that's maximum time frame is about 10 years for wood like that to last. So, or is it just to look like that, and we're thinking of a different treatment?
No, it's a good question. So the main paving we're looking at is actually a cast in place concrete, which you're kind of seeing on the walkways. We were interested in using kind of a structural mass timber for some of the overlooks and potentially the structure. This is actually one where it's lifted actually higher up, and we can talk about that a bit in terms of flooding, et cetera. We definitely understand it's a harsh climate, but we were also trying to figure out ways to introduce, warmer, more natural materials, and structural timber and mass timber has actually come really far in the last even 5 years. So the hope is that with the right kind of timber and treatment in terms of its finish and everything else, that could be a potential.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And then all of the bluff seating is
One
kind
more,
of, we're
one
looking
more,
at the
please.
sandstone. Yeah.
Excuse me, one more. Commissioner McGuire.
Sorry, I just came from Savannah, so I'm all riverfront excited now. Savannah just redid their riverfront just about 5 years, and they have lots of stores and places to eat, restaurants and things, and places for water taxis to sort of take you across to across to Harriet Island and then over to the other end of the thing, and it's a free water taxi. So they have all sorts of things going on in Savannah, which has totally revitalized their city and their waterfront. Are we gonna, maybe this is coming up, but are we gonna have, are there just gonna be kiosks for food and thinking ice cream and stuff, and maybe not restaurants, but at least for people to get something to eat and buy things?
Beer gardens. Beer gardens.
No, yeah,
And
it's a good question. I think, the idea was that we were highlighting a couple locations where we could have, they could be, some of them could be movable. Ideally, some of them are permanent, especially within the Second Street connector. The new pedestrian and bike area is one location. There was a idea to have potentially something in Kellogg Mall Park, and then at Lampert's Landing. So that's, those are the different locations that we've highlighted with the most potential. Of course, we're still in schematic design, so all of that would require further, development.
Thanks. So Lambert's Landing is Union Depot, right?
Yeah.
I don't know
Not
who
to
Lambert's
forget
is.
specifically River's Edge and Union
River's Edge and
Depot,
Union
which
Depot, right, which
have
really
great
has places.
potential.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair. Commissioner Reinhardt.
This is really going to sound like a silly question also, but between the county and the city, we own all of this property, correct? Is there any portion of it that we don't own?
Yeah.
Energy?
And
Madam
science
Chair, Commissioner, the custom house would be the one single private ownership piece
Okay.
between Jackson and Sibley and Eagle Street, essentially.
That stays, I mean, there's no.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
and
only.
then
It's
there's
basically adding amenities to a private,
Mhm.
okay.
there's the long-term lease with the Science Museum, of course, but that is still city-owned land, right? Yeah.
Commissioner McDonough?
Yeah, and just for some history, Jim Stoppelstadt, who did Custom House, actually held one of the earliest meetings on this at Custom House. And when they built Custom House,
Mm-hmm.
there's actually some accommodations for this, recognizing that he was an early
Wow.
believer in this and helping kind of pull this together.
Fantastic. Might I ask also, before we move forward, is there any visioning around Union Depot right there on the edge by the railroad? You know, I'm losing
Yeah.
track, but, and I can get back, of course, to our staff regarding that. But anything you can tell me about that area around Union Depot that is focused here?
So I think we are certainly looking at Union Depot, the kind of compound of Union Depot itself as a key institutional anchor, right? And in this overall framework, I don't think we had envisioned actually intervening within the grounds of Union Depot as a part of this, but definitely the streets that run along it, the connection that comes from it, mainly Sibley in this case, how that descends down towards Lampert's Landing is something that we think is a part of this project. But if that's something that needs to be added as a part of this, we can certainly have that discussion.
Well, I know that our staff, Josh particularly, is at the table and that discussion will proceed. But I often forget that Lambert's Landing is right there, too. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I will add that what Sanjukta is saying, we are trying to make those connections from Kellogg on the streetscape, especially with, on top of Union Depot, where there is a lot of public interaction. We want to make that connection a similar character so people understand.
Right.
And then also, we are showing an overlook or identifying that when you are inside Union Depot and looking out, you are seeing the river balcony.
That's exactly
We'll
what,
try to make those connections.
yeah, that's exactly what I
in the
was,
future.
thank you. And that's right, you're looking down
Right.
and you're seeing it. Thank you for the interruption, for allowing it. Go ahead.
No problem. Okay, I think we can move on to Mara's segment.
Sorry, you guys, we took up more time.
That's okay. We're
Thank you.
really glad to be here, and of course we're also enthralled by the design and spending time. So thank you all for your questions and for going through that in such detail, Sanjukta and Lisa. I'm going to pass it over to Ethan. As Lisa said, kind of at the close of that presentation, there's a lot of other elements that have to do with implementation of such a beautiful design, including thinking about audiences, thinking about operations funding, and then governance and long-term operations.
Yeah, thanks, Mara. And so where we ended with the design was the transformative potential of the river balcony. And I think we wanted to talk a little bit about, who is going to be experiencing that transformative impact. So generally, for the majority of park visitors are local and regional residents, and this is true even for the most successful and well-known open spaces in the world. So for Central Park, for example, more than half of the visitors live next to the park, and more than 2/3 of visitors live in New York City. Next slide, please. So for St. Paul, we analyzed the communities that the river balcony might serve, and we organized this into 3 areas. One, the downtown core, which is comprised primarily of affluent, well-educated residents. with a growing number of families and adults. The north area, which also has a growing number of older adults, but also a significant foreign-born population, comprised of immigrants from African and Asian countries, including the Somali and Hmong communities. And then the south area, which is predominantly people of Latin American descent, also with a growing Asian population. Next slide, please. So based on the visitations from the communities in the direct vicinity of the river balcony, in addition to regional visitation from county residents, workers, and tourists, we estimate that the river balcony will draw an estimated 2.9 million visitors annually. And we benchmark that to other comparable parks in the region, such as the Central Mississippi Waterfront, Como Park, and Minnehaha Park, and we see the river balcony falling right within that range. Next slide, please. So we believe the river balcony will provide significant benefits to residents, workers, visitors across both the city and the larger county. And we see this happening in three ways. The first is establishing an inclusive public realm that provides new opportunities for diverse communities to access recreation, leisure, and cultural programming, as well as creating equitable contracting opportunities for women and minority-owned businesses. It's going to expand visitation to existing and planned downtown attractions, and also serve as a catalyst for further public and private investment. Next slide. And so to achieve these benefits, the river balcony is going to have to deliver on 5 components. The first is clear goals and shared visiting, which we've developed with community input and are furthering in discussions like these, and also with the city and other stakeholders. Great design, which you saw earlier today. A strong and long-lasting leadership, which Mara will speak to later. Management of capital construction and development for the park, which is really enabled through a strong governance structure. And what I'm going to focus on the next few slides is sustained funding and operations to ensure the long-term success of the park. Next slide, please. So our team looked at similar types of downtown signature programmed linear open spaces and promenades that are comparable to the river balcony. And we developed operations and maintenance cost estimates based on that. So we're really looking at $150,000 to $175,000 per acre, which multiplied by the site area of close to 21 acres results in an annual operating cost of $3.1 to $3.6 million. And the total acreage includes many of the county-owned areas. So that includes like River's Edge, the parking lot, as well as parts of Kellogg Boulevard. Next slide, please. So we don't envision that one party will be responsible for all or even most of the operating costs. As with many open spaces, nowadays, like we expect operating funds to come from a variety of sources. And those sources may be value capture, which is basically capturing the incremental property value that comes with the creation of a signature park. Earned income through food and beverage concessions, retail establishments, events, and other rentals or leasings. Contributed income, which is basically various forms of philanthropy, and then public funding. Next slide, please. So by supporting the river balcony, different funders are going to receive various benefits based on the scale of those benefits and also the extent to which it can be monetized. The river balcony is going to increase property values in the immediate vicinity of the open space. And that value capture will use some of that property value increase to support park operations. But adjacent landowners will also retain a significant premium of that property value increase. With respect to earned income, revenue generation at local businesses and existing tourist attractions will increase as more people are drawn to downtown. For contributed income, philanthropists can advance their mission to create more equitable and transformational public realm in downtown St. Paul, which will in turn drive further economic development. And then public funding can support the public good, as well as result in eventually an increase in fiscal revenues as a result of more sales due to visitation and increased property values. Next slide, please.
Commissioner McDonough,
Yep.
Can we go back to the next slide, please?
go back to the previous.
Yeah, because, you know, I mean, I appreciate this piece of it because, you know, eyes wide open, you need to be prepared for this. You know, you can have all the heart and vision you want, but to make it actually happen, you really have to be able to deliver on the end here. On the public funding, municipal, regional government, I'm suspecting, or I'm hoping, you know, just as we've talked about, you know, the park at Rivers Front, that, you know, we position these to become part of the regional park system that can actually access regional park funding that comes from the state through the Met Council, you know, to potentially urban parks here that are regional in nature. And I just want to make sure we're thinking of it from that perspective. So we're positioning these to potentially become like that so that we can access that state funding that comes through the Met Council, because that's a big piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that feedback. We're definitely looking to tap into as many funding sources as possible. Any other questions? Okay.
Well, I would also just like to reinforce Commissioner McDonough's comment in observing that as we create this space, the river balcony, it is, I'm assuming, all really being positioned as park space. And that the thoughts around planning, who maintains, who runs, who, you know, directs the activation, are all a part of planning that park space. I mean, this is green, this is environmental, this is certainly going to have business and, you know, activation as well. But it will happen on, in essence, park space. And I just want to confirm, based on his comment, that that is what we're looking at, correct? Commissioner McDonough wants to add.
Yeah, you certainly are the consultants, but Tristan and I were just having a sidebar. I mean, you got to be strategic there, right? Because there are limitations when public dollars come into play about private enterprise. And you find that out. I mean, you can't put even a hot dog stand on Target Field Station because there's FTA dollars in there, right? And Depot is the same way. You have to be extremely careful. But you're strategic. It's, you know, 2 miles.
Plan, yeah.
There's connectors that become parkland that you can leverage all the possible funding, public funding you can. There's pieces that maybe you want to, you know, preserve for restaurant or private development that you find a way to capitalize, but then operationalize through that piece. And so it might not be one full park. You have to be strategic about, you know, what limits you when you leverage public funding, and how do you maximize private investment with public dollars to make those connections.
Thank you for enhancing
Does that make sense? I see some shaking of heads, but.
Might be tricky, but. Yeah, but you figure it out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, it's a
Right.
great point. And I think, you know, this project has both parkland, it has streetscape, and it also has, you know, some of these other kind of pieces. And so I do think being really strategic about, you know, where that's why part of the reason in terms of streetscape, you know, in terms of Kellogg Boulevard, in terms of the Second Street connector, some of these other places might have a little bit more leeway in terms of where you would be able to have, you know, some of this activation, et cetera. But it's a conversation we actually want to be proactive about. I would say we
Mhm.
want to like actually have those discussions to talk through that as we move forward.
And so the schematic will begin to flesh out what is what and where as we move forward in planning. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for
That's right.
raising. Commissioner
Just
And
McGuire.
Just to state the
sorry,
obvious.
I was just gonna say,
You're showing the Irish Fair in St. Paul, which is on Harriet Island. And so we obviously want a connection between Harriet Island and St. Paul. A really easy, nice, well-marked, bike path, walking path, whatever, between.
If you recall,
Or a boat.
I'm gonna jump in here. Jesse Ventura called out drunken Irishmen behind the streets in St. Paul. We know how to get around and connect ourselves really well.
I love it. I love it.
I'm sorry, so
Okay,
I know, I love the water shuttle. Go ahead.
I was just going to add that I think we to build on what you were saying, we need to be strategic about which are the definitions that are permissive to adding activation moments, right? So I think if something is better off being called a street plaza or an avenue of some type, I think we want to define the spaces in a way that is strategic about what is allowed to be done there. So I think that's something that we'll discuss as we move forward with the design.
Great. I think let's skip, for the sake of time, let's skip to 68. And I'm gonna pass it.
You wanted
back to Mara.
68, Ethan?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to say, and the slides that we're skipping through now are some examples of how each of those different funding sources has looked in different places. And I think we've already seen through the schematic design where we're thinking about plugging in a lot of those different elements, including things like the food kiosks, which are, of course, an important activation and inclusion tool, but are also an opportunity to regenerate some funding to go into operations of the park, streetscape, et cetera. See prior conversation on what we're calling all of these spaces. So what we've then started to look at is what that stack actually looks like when we're thinking about where all of these different funding sources are coming together. How much is each of them contributing? We think that value capture and using those ground leases has an opportunity to kind of build funding over time. Earned income, again, will continue to stabilize. And down in this bottom section, we have the city of St. Paul, where we looked at how much funding they spend on other parks.
Oh, it happened.
Okay, I think Mara might have dropped off, but I can take over. So yeah, we looked at basically what the city of St. Paul spends on existing parks and what an equitable contribution would be if they were to spend a similar amount on a per acre basis on the river balcony. And so we're hoping to leverage both city funding and hopefully county and state funding to fill some of that gap. Next slide, please. Okay, Mara, are you back?
Yes, I'm so sorry. My whole screen turned dark. And we'll get through this as quickly as possible. This is just showing kind of how these different sources stabilize over time. So when we're thinking about a funding stack, that is a static moment. But of course, we know that things like value capture, as the different spaces are built out, will create additional value over time. So let's keep going. The last part of what we wanted to talk about within our scope of work is how different partners share these responsibilities. And we know that, all of the dedicated folks in the room, as well as many other rooms that we've been able to connect to, are involved in this type of work. So there's the public sector. We've spoken with folks in the special services district. We know that there are local property owners who will see this accrued value and likely have an interest in how the space looks and operates. And there's other private and nonprofit sources like the Science Center, other landowners or land leasers along this different balcony elements. And so our next task is thinking about how all of this comes together to secure funding and other key functions. So on the left, we'll see things like funding and development. We know that there's capital need, but we also know that there's long-term day-to-day operations. and then what that looks like to program it, to steward it, to take care of all of these spaces, and to see that the activation, the welcoming spaces, the inclusion, and all of the things that will make this project so special are really carried out, and can deliver on that brand promise. Next, thanks.
I have a question, Commissioner Reinhardt.
On the county, I think you said county pretty quickly there, city and county.
I moved over that.
Do we have,
Time, of
are there
course.
examples of how we've done this with other parks within the city of St. Paul? Because is this going to be a first if we were to somehow put money into operations of a city park? That seems a little odd to me, but maybe we do it in other places. And the other part is, since it is mostly a park, I assume that TIF is going to be off the table? Because if TIF is on the table, then,
Value captured.
is that what value, okay.
Yeah.
Because there's a contribution obviously there from that the county doesn't get.
So that question, I'm gonna go to Ryan for.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt, and I was kind of holding a few of the cost thoughts till the end, but I'll take my swing now.
Okay.
I mean, I think the comments from Commissioner McDonough weigh in here well earlier too, so I'll just package them all as we're listening. I don't think we have a partnership like this. This would be a unique partnership, but I feel compelled to at least mention in the understanding of where we all sit as we talk through these things. I mean, I very much support the vision of what we see here. I think the board does too. There's a reason you were the first ones to invest in. But I feel a need to recognize the costs and the investment going into one of those segments to build a park at River's Edge alongside this, and the county's freight they're likely going to carry in that space. And I'm not asking for it to get included on your stack necessarily here, but it is a dynamic for us as we stretch real hard to make that park come to fruition. It's important to this project, but it also impedes our ability to fund this the way we otherwise might. And I don't mean that as good or bad. I just want to say, like, that's an important part of our consideration. We'll be at the table the whole way to continue these conversations about value capture and would there be precedent and how does it fit with River's Edge as we go forward.
Tony?
Go ahead,
I
Commissioner.
could just add one thing. I mean, certainly we don't have anything that lines like, the potential this could be. But, we do combine, our Keller Park with St. Paul's Phelan Park to become a regional park that qualifies. So from the Met Council's perspective, regional money coming into Phelan, Keller come in because we combine those as one regional park because they abut. And though they're individually owned, they're viewed regionally as one Keller Phelan Regional Park. So there's ways, again, strategic and creative ways, maybe to leverage what we do at Riverfront, funded through a developer, funded through county money, funded ever how we do it, but then abutting with potentially, city pieces or whatever that can help us position to leverage other dollars moving forward. And so there is a kind of a template already with county-city partnership in this way to leverage outside dollars to help support a shared interest that benefits all of our residents.
Thank you for pointing that out, and certainly partnership in this regard is going to be critical. Commissioner Castillo and then Commissioner Reinhardt?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's on the main point here is, if there are ways that we can do it, but what I heard was, and your point about getting regional park money in there is one thing, but what I heard was county versus Met Council. And I don't think we have a county one that we have put money into a park. You didn't put money into a park in Maplewood, county money, it was Met Council because that was the regional park.
Yeah.
No, Keller and Phelan were combined, to be honest with you. I've learned something new every day.
At the regional level, yeah.
Yeah, I did. And that's great.
Thank you for the distinction.
And I think there is a distinction, and I'm not saying it's not worth considering, but I need, it's something new, and we haven't done it, and there are other cities in this county.
Thank you for pointing that out, and that's very important that we be clear about it. We are partners at the table working through this, and so the considerations for what certain dollars look like as opposed to what others might look like will be a part, I'm certain, that we'll continue to work through.
This would be, what's described here is not just a benefit to St. Paul or Ramsey County, it's a benefit to this entire state.
Absolutely.
State money, well, we are asking for state money.
You're
obviously.
So maybe I missed it, but we're talking a lot about money, but I haven't heard how
The
much
dollars.
money. So what are we actually talking about? Do we have a dollar amount, or are you saving that for the end?
The
I
operation.
don't think it's in the presentation here, so
Oh, to create it, I don't know that that's been.
your timing is great.
Okay.
So let's see if there's a response to the question about what the dollars look like for this investment. Looking to see who would have that information here or how we follow up.
We've been looking specifically at the dollar amount for maintenance and operations, not from a capital perspective, but year over year, we're estimating about 3.5 million for the total operations of the space at the high end of the estimate. It could be as low as 3.1 million. And we
that's on the
estimate that on a per acre basis. Yeah.
And so right here in this presentation, that's what we're talking about. And so the estimates that you give on what the dollar types would be are based against that operation.
Right. So we're now estimating a share of that total operation.
And clearly, nothing has been worked out. Your estimates are what they are. And we are happy, you know, really to be partners in this effort to plan and to help figure out those components, whether we bring dollars from the county to the table or whether we're helping to attract regional funding, state funding. You know, we're willing to help talk through that, although we haven't figured it out, nor have you, of course, at this point. Commissioner McDonough.
And then I just want to make sure there's confirmation, but, you know, on kind of on the full build-out side, this isn't an all or nothing, right? It's not like building a stadium where you get one big thing and you do it all at once, right? There's clearly sections here. There's pieces that are, you know, much more viable early on. You know, the work we're doing with AECom is going to really put wind in the sail, which could drive the Science Museum, that full west end, which starts putting wind in the sail along the whole thing. So the operations dollar is a full kind of potential vision to build out. And it's probably not going to be, you know, a whole build out at one time, but pieces that come online and complement and strengthen the rest of them as they continue to build out. You know, I mean, actually, I think the reason why this board got involved in the beginning is they seen kind of this anchor ends, River, you know, Union Depot, Lambert, Riverfront Science Museum as being the strong pieces, and then you start filling in. And actually, the sweet spot is kind of the potential is with Kellogg Mall and what that looks like, right? But you start building in towards that and reaching that vision. So even on the operations piece, you're not necessarily solving the $3.1 million a year piece, you know, immediately. It's built into it as you're filling out the corridor. And I'm seeing shaking the heads, but I need to make sure everybody agrees.
That's
with what I
right.
just-
No, I think even in the preliminary phasing and implementation, we were looking at, you know, anywhere from probably 3 to 4 phases. And to be, you know, honest, there are certain things that kind of have to happen before other things in terms of staging and other types of things, as well as other projects that we're, you know, either needing to avoid and or leverage. But, you know, all of that too is to be worked out kind of post, you know, the schematic design, although we are planning in the next couple of months to have, you know, more detailed information in terms of capital cost estimates, phasing and implementation strategies, right? Just to help with the next set of discussions.
Thank you. The table here is quiet. We're back to you. And I know we're getting on time. It doesn't seem we've got a lot of slides left here.
Yeah, I think we're wrapping up
you.
and we wanted Mary to close. So hopefully, yeah.
Yes, I'll just quickly say this slide is exactly what Lisa was just talking about. There's a series of things that'll happen in different phases, and we're looking forward to thinking them through with you all as partners. Thanks. To you, Mary.
Well, thank you. I realize that we are very short on time, and I wanted to thank all of you for being so actively involved in our presentation. As you know from the agenda and what the slide that we've got up right now, we have some asks for you. And really these asks build on the whole concept of partnership. And how that partnership will evolve over time. And these really are also similar questions or similar asks that we made to the city as well. Right now, we are working with a variety of department directors and staff, both on the River's Edge side of things and public works and otherwise. So we really want to make sure that there's a possibility of appointing a staff member to make sure that this coordination across county departments continues to happen along with the city and the design team. And also making sure that a high-level staffer is always at the River Balcony Stakeholder Committee. And I want to be clear, you know, Carrie and Josh and all have been attending these stakeholder committees, but we just needed to put it in there just to make sure that somebody is there. There's going to be a period of negotiation once the schematic design package is delivered, where all the partners are going to come together to determine roles and responsibilities. And we want to make sure that Ramsey County has a staffer at the table for that negotiation period. Similarly, when we are going in and creating the governance structure, the shared governance structure, we want to make sure from a Ramsey County perspective that this is a priority project and that Ramsey County will play a leadership role in governance for this project. Going directly to earlier comments, which is we want to be working together to sort all this out and bring these projects to fruition and be successful in the long run. So although this is 5 bullet points, it's sort of, you know, 3 or 4 confirmations and requests, which kind of have a staffing role, but again, making sure that coordination is smooth, and the project is a priority, and that you're at the table around negotiation as well as governance. So that was fast and furious.
Thank you. It was, and of course, it's all written down here, and we do appreciate your acknowledging the participation that currently exists as Ramsey County has prioritized our role, and thankful that Carrie and Josh are there representing us as, in essence, stakeholders together with you here as we anticipate you acknowledge the city also is participating together with us as we think about the broad projects that exist along this pathway and how we work together to ensure that we are able to work in prioritization and in partnership together to ensure that we all are able to get this work done. So I just want to acknowledge that we are affirming what already exists as staff at the table with you. We will be working with you, with those representatives sharing this information and figuring out the timing and the work that needs to be done around governance, and making certain that we are co-operating together as we look at the whole breadth of this area for the projects that include the River Balcony as well as River's Edge and all of the work that is incorporated there. So I wanted just to acknowledge that, and I do see that there are some hands, a couple of hands, Commissioner McDonough, Commissioner Montes-Castillo, Commissioner Reinhardt, with additional comments as we wrap up or questions as we wrap up. Commissioner McDonough.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And I need to kind of come clean here a little bit, right? And I mean, going back, and Raphael, I'm glad you're back in the room. I was hoping we weren't going to lose you because you were really a big part of this. When, Mary and just a couple of people I mentioned, referenced the meeting Jim Stoppelstead had at Custom House, kind of this early visioning about, the potential of this. And we brought this to the county board for, reasons we've already talked about. This board fully bought in that, we should be a part of this. You know, Mary's come to me, you know, with updates, just as I know she's come to Raphael and maybe other folks, and to this point of, okay, now we're at the spot of, you know, governance and getting ready as we move forward. And, you know, I suggested to her that we should do a workshop. So the county board kind of owes a check-in from that original investment in that vision. And I want to acknowledge Carrie and her team and the work they did. Carrie suggested she's got a workshop coming up in the future on economic development, maybe including that piece to it. And I really kind of said, no, I'd really like to see this come back to us for this fuller conversation. But the other piece I wanted to call out before it is, you know, and I've referenced this, we all have, and we can remember, you know, Elizabeth laying out, you know, when we own it and when we do it, right? When we're conveners, and I think this morning workshop was a really good demonstration of convening. You know, the county attorney has really done a good job of convening. There's times when we're collaborators, and that's what our original $100,000 was. And that early first in and last in is always the toughest one. And I can remember it was kind of quiet, and then, you know, we put our money in, and, you know, Mary had her charge, all right, go out and find the other, whatever money it took to get all that team around you, right? And it took a lot. And the community stepped up because we did that. And that was kind of that collaborator. We didn't own it, you know, we were a part of it. We knew there were shared benefits there with our interest at, you know, Union Depot, our interest at Riverfront. And I wanted to make sure I called that out there because so many times we always focus in on what we own, but the value of what we do sometimes is convening or collaborating. But then as that collaboration grows, what's our responsibility to help continue that? What does that look like? I think we're seeing some here today about potentially what that might look like moving forward. You know, to actually realize in the vision and turn that into a reality. And so, you know, I just wanted to acknowledge, you know, Carrie really felt strongly this would have been part of her larger workshop, and I wouldn't disagree with her one bit on that. But I wanted to make sure we as a board continued to have this understanding that collaborating can be just as strong as the work we do every day when we own it, or convening can be just as strong an impact in the community as we've seen this morning. And this is a really good example of that collaboration. But then what does it mean to us, Tony? I think you really laid it out well before I even, you know, what does that mean to us moving forward at this point in time of that collaboration that we were a part of starting? And how do we stick with it, that sustained leadership? And then the last piece I'll share with before others weigh in, you know, we were hearing kind of like, oh, what if we could do this, or what if we could do that, right? Well, that's when that leadership and how much we engage as collaborators, how much influence we're going to be able to have, because you need that strong political wind. I mean, to close Kellogg, how cool would that be? But I tell you what, the mayor's not going to do it by himself. He is not. And,
Right.
you know, a city council member's not going to do it by themselves, but a united community, we can do a lot together. So with that, I'll step back, and I know other folks here wanted to jump in.
Thank you. Commissioner Mansky.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. That was really helpful because I've never heard any of that history, so that's all new to me.
Yeah.
So that's super helpful. And I guess it goes to those 5 bullet points. I think, you know, we're hearing that we're all supportive, we like this idea, we want the work. I'm a little worried when it says commitment to funding and what that looks like when we don't have a dollar amount. And as county manager mentioned, is we're trying to build the park at River's Edge. And in this design, some of that's our property already, right? The parking lot, for instance, is our property. So I just want us to, before we're like all in on how much liquid cash that we might contribute, that it might be in kind versus liquid, and in that collaboration piece, especially until we have a dollar amount, because we have finite resources, and a whole county to make sure that we're fair and equitable along the way too. So that was my thought.
Well said. Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt, and then Commissioner Ortega.
And then Commissioner Goyer.
Okay.
The last 2 bullets on the last slide, were the ones that were concerning to me. Well, we do know that once it's all done, the estimate on the operation and maintenance side is $350 to $415K a year.
Oh, 3.5 million.
No, but that city portion of that, right? I think of the other funding sources, that was what they said would be at the city level, and I assume that they're talking about us being at, sharing in that city level, at least that's what I thought I heard. But still, I mean, it's a lot of money, and we're clearly not in any position today to say, yeah, we'll do that, and we don't even know what the capital costs are. I think, so, and then the governance structure, confirming that we will be a player in the governance structure, the devil's in the details. We don't know what that is. We can't, as a county board, confirm something that we don't know what it is. But being collaborators, getting us there and seeing if there's a governance structure that we go, okay, yeah, we can do this, we can do that. But to just do it kind of in the blind doesn't make any sense to me. One thing that I'm wondering about, and this is out there a little bit, but the state capitol and the mall there, I assume that the state of Minnesota pays for the operation and maintenance of, I mean, what's there. I am wondering if, because, I mean, this is really, I really do view it as a state, an extension of the state mall, basically. Like we have different areas in Washington DC that are federal and they're operated federally. I just wonder if we couldn't look at this as basically an extension of the state mall. What I'm calling the mall, anyway.
Okay.
It's, well, I mean, really, who is it benefiting? Yeah.
Yeah.
I just,
Capital Area Planning Board, you'd have to change their jurisdiction.
oh, okay. Well, I'm just throwing stuff out there. Because it seems like the state should be doing something with this, even on the operations and maintenance side of it. So anyhow, I'm all in as far as the collaboration. I guess the other one was where it said that we would make it a priority. Now, a priority to me is affirming that it's a priority means legislative. And we are supportive, but we may have competing things that are priorities for us. I mean, River's Edge is our top priority. I don't know if that's considered part of this overall project or how they do that, but I think we have to be careful about affirming that in advance. But we will be supportive, and we will try to figure out how to work collaboratively. We will do all those things that you want, but signing on a bottom line right now, we don't have enough information. But I love this idea, and honestly, I remember I was sitting here thinking about it, and I was thinking about all the times I sat in meetings 20 plus years ago and talking about this. And so, and the business community and everybody coming together, as you said, I mean, you were there when it was getting more to fruition, but when I started, it was more of a dream, not even something you could actually envision. But this is a long time coming, and it will transform. Right? It will transform this city.
And there have clearly been discussions before this presentation between staff at the city and staff at the county, and we have a lot of work to do to make sure we can lift up these priorities together to ensure that it all gets through. You're right, we don't have enough information at the table today. We're receiving the request, appreciate the request and the potential for joint work together that gets us to the answers that we need in planning. I'm thankful that everyone is registering the same thoughts. These are big requests. This is a big piece of work, and we all have a lot at stake to benefit, to gain, but also potentially, to contribute. So we are going to be looking at this down the road. I've got a couple of more comments, but also working through staff to continue these conversations because we know we don't have all the answers at the table today. Commissioner Ortega?
I was just going to say, this is very helpful, as Jim stated, because it's been, 3 years since we really had a discussion on this. Most of the properties, the key properties are ours, and we've had a long vision on both the Union Depot for over 20 years and on the West Building. What we need to do, I think, is with Carrie's workshop, I don't think we have to make any decision now. What we need to do is wait till Carrie puts together the workshop, decide what we're gonna do on River's Edge. I mean, that's the key. So that's the cornerstone to even this project. Because that's a massive piece of work, and if that's done, the other pieces kind of fall in place. And we could also then take on the issue of what does it mean in terms of funding? How do we wrap around dollars, wherever they come from? And what would be our response to that? But clearly, we've got the massive piece of work in this whole balcony. Because imagine if we don't do River's Edge, where this project is gonna need that much more money to even come close to fulfilling that vision.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, ask a question, then we've got Commissioner
Just on that point, because I think that's really important, is, you know, is the city, I don't know who answered this, but is the city gonna do this with or without River's Edge, or are they contingent on each other?
Yeah.
Right? And how does that work, and
Well, I
is that
think
indeed?
the key pieces for us is,
Yeah.
well,
We're, that's ours, but I'm just wondering about this project, does it happen without River's Edge?
well, I think Kellogg is the major, and that's the critical piece,
Yeah.
right? The other piece, I mean, we talked about this as a board before the city even came into play in terms of the High Line, like in New York City, and do we build the High Line?
Right.
And so a lot of this has all come together from a lot of discussion. This goes back to Norm Coleman's conversations, and, I mean, I could keep on going.
Yeah, okay.
So I think we need to decide first
Yeah.
what that is gonna be for their project to go further, and
Right.
what are we talking about in terms
Yeah.
of dollars?
Right,
Our project changes if we don't put in a park,
right.
Exactly.
financially and every other way, and how we package it, right?
Right. All of this is working together, and that is a key question.
Right.
We'll continue to.
I'll just be brief here, and it's so helpful to hear my colleagues. You're all so wise, and it's great to hear the history again. Thank you for that. I've always thought we should be closer to the river, which is why I support all of these things. You hardly know we're on a river unless we start doing these things. And so I'm just so proud of us to, you know, have the courage to have these really hard conversations. We should ask the federal government, because they have a federal courthouse near the river down there. We could, work on that. So, you know, let's not forget that. You know, they put those courthouses.
It's federal?
They put those federal courthouses in really nice places. Anyway, so good job thinking that creatively. When on those 5 points, you know, yes, we want to be partners and everything, and it's right, convener, partner, and collaborator. I just was concerned when it said a leadership role. We want to be on the leadership team, but I don't see us leading this project that I can think of, although, I don't know, maybe we are. I don't think we're leading this project. We're part of a team that's taking this project on. Just wanted to say that, and just to say that I am high on these kind of projects, because if you ever go to a city like a Savannah, where they totally have transformed their city, you say, oh my God, I can't believe you guys just did this in the last 5 years. They said, oh yeah, this is a new project. I can't even imagine that city without their riverfront. I mean, they had something on their waterfront, but now it's like unbelievably so much a part of their city. So I can just see this transforming how people think about our city, and, wow. So I know it's a lot, and we have a lot of things to think about, but I thank you, all of you that are thinking about this, and whatever we can do to make it work.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn to County Manager O'Connor for some comments.
Thanks, Madam Chair. We've been at the table through this part of the process. Josh on the team that helped select the consultants you saw present today, and this work is tied in at multiple stops along the way. I want to give kudos to Josh specifically with CED and EGCI. This is why we have service teams too, because property management fits in with the same department as parks, which fits in with CED, and guess what? We got all the right areas at the table, and that changes the way we would have done this back in 2014. You can just imagine how much fun that would have been.
Wow.
As a department level. I'm actually picturing all the players in that, and you all should laugh a little bit. That's great. Yeah, that'll be quite the workshop.
Where we are.
So, Mary, I think the thing I'll leave you with, right, because we haven't had a chance to talk about this more, if you're not getting the direction that you need and the leadership that you need from the team, we need to confront that and talk about it more. And I'm not saying you said that today. I'm going to lay that on the table. But otherwise, I do think through the EGCI team, we have the right folks sitting there right now. There are two other dynamics though that this surfaced really well today that I would flag for our team and for the broader project. And we've all heard it, so I'm not saying anything, profound, but there's a political dynamic to the will to do some of this. Commissioner McDonough specifically referenced that. That's different, and at some point, for the limited, like the whole project's not gonna require that. I mean, doing the engineering that designs how the deck fits with the bridge, I don't know if that's a political question at the beginning, right? It's more of like, how does it all fit together? But for the things that require political will, do you want to close a street? Do you want to extend an area? Do you want to transform something beyond what is possible? I would ask that we make space for elected officials to do the right type of work on this so that we don't confuse the parts of the project where I feel like we're doing a really good job moving with the parts that are the opening up new possibilities. Otherwise, we may be constrained.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, finance fits somewhere between those two zones on projects like this. And I could link it into both areas potentially, but, I think we'll do a good job with the existing team finding financing through the things that exist in the world. But sometimes, I'm just making it up, but like Betty McCollum can write things into bills that may or may not pass at the federal level that create new funding or conversations at the state level. And so I just would say like, there's a dynamic of, I think we need to be smart about like, the administrative or staff side with the political side and how that all fits together would be really a helpful piece as we move, because this project mixes both. And I'll just end with Commissioner Ortega walked out, but loud and clear, I think the question for us right now in framing, I wasn't keeping tabs on it. But, your point about River's Edge is a good one, and we do feel a responsibility through this team, which isn't today, to be calling that question on some of that sooner rather than later, which helps you all slot where this may or may not fit. And so I'll just say that out loud, that's something that's on the docket as we move through this year, and we're all tracking.
Just one quick thing, when you
Go
said
ahead.
Representative McCollum,
Okay.
the Mississippi River Restoration and Resiliency Initiative.
Okay.
I'm renewing that resolution at NACO, by the way.
Great,
I want to do that.
Mhm.
But I would think that she would love to be one of the first
That's
things.
exactly.
She would.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
I
this
agree.
has been an
I agree.
incredible set of information that you've provided
Mhm.
for us. We want to say thank you so much. Double thanks again to
Good job, Jim.
our, everyone who's been here today with us, to city and to county and to consultant members on the line with us also. This is, as you've observed, a set of questions that will take us clearly longer to answer. CED, our Community Economic Development team, will be planning a workshop with the board upcoming, within which we'll have opportunity to consider the ask that you've presented to us and to think through our role of partnership and collaboration with the city on this project, to think about how it meshes with other things that the county is fully invested in right now, and really to consider the opportunity of being partners together to make sure that it all works for the benefit of all in our community. So I want to say just thank you on behalf of the board. Let you know we will be continuing these conversations. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, with our staff at the table today, and to also think about opportunities for the board to be more involved. Are there other things that board members wanted to finish up with?
Well done.
Then we are going to head out with a very, very big thank you once again. Take care.
Thank you.